I mean, I think that point of when you're entering the facility and that like it's a little bit of it's a loss of control, right? You don't have
Mm,
your phone, you don't have your Apple Watch, you don't have your identification. You're
yeah.
given this little plastic badge, and that is who you are in the eyes of that correctional facility for those 4 hours that you're
Yeah.
in the facility is badge number 7 or whatever. And you walk through and you go in that big Sally port, those automatic closing metal gates with the barbed wire all around the top and then kind of all around the sides. And um, it really kind of strips you down, right? To just like, I'm just Paul today. And like, I'm not exactly sure what to expect or what's going to happen. And that place is a really interesting place to start a conversation with someone because they have had the same experience to like an ultimate degree. They're wearing matching green clothes. Their inmate number 24756 or whatever. They're only called by their last name. Um, and even when they do count every day, they have to like call out their number. And so that's how they're known. Um, and it's this very dehumanizing place to kind of start. But then when you're put into conversation of we want you guys to find something in common with each other, or however, whatever the conversation topic is of that day, you're able to just connect as people.
Stacey Putka, welcome to the Inner Entrepreneur Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to chat more with you, Paul.
Do you know, there's very few people that I can say this to, but I can say to you that we met in prison. Um, and my regular guests are going, what? What's he telling us? But we met in Arkansas Valley Correctional Facility, which is a higher maximum security prison. You can let me know. And that was back in September 26. And it's a day that since, honestly, it's rarely from my mind. I don't think a day goes by that I don't think about it. And I don't think I will forget it. So maybe you'd start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and what led you to being in prison with me that fine day.
It's so sometimes doing this work, every single day, I get a little caught up in like the details. And so to hear that your trip with us, like you think about it every day, that really means a lot to me. So thank you for sharing that. I started, if we really go back to like the root of why I choose to do this work, I grew up with a father who was an entrepreneur and who struggled with addiction. He got sober right before I was born and maintained sobriety through the rest of his life. He was always such a great example of resilience and redemption, and really taught me that people should never be defined by their worst choices or their worst mistakes. Um, and so I wanted to be a therapist, to work with people like him who are experiencing addiction and help them be the best version of themselves. And we criminalize substance misuse in the United States. And my career led me to working with folks with criminal histories. And I've spent my entire career, since my very first internship, working with people involved in the criminal legal system. And I got really frustrated by how that process worked and how that system worked. And just found myself questioning, like, why are there not more opportunities for rehabilitation and growth while people are incarcerated? So we started Breakthrough, our organization that you volunteered with on that day in September, as a response to that and a way to give people an opportunity for transformation while they're still incarcerated. So we operate programs inside prisons to be able to do that work.
It's it's interesting. I mean, if you do this every day, and if you're in these prisons on a regular basis and you're dealing with the people in there, I can see it normalizes to some degree. What so I went over to Denver with 12 entrepreneurs. We called ourselves the Denver Dozen, but there you go. That that's our WhatsApp groups. Um, and you know, it's I spoke to them. I spoke. We had a group call a couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned that you were coming on the podcast, and I mentioned we'd had a chat prep, and I said I had a great chat with Stacey. I said, but what I noticed was that just the whatever that was, a 40-minute conversation we had, it just stirred me emotionally having that conversation with you. I'm sure you're unaware of this is because it's the norm for you, but just this, I don't know, it was this about 6 weeks ago or whatever it was, but just having that conversation with you just brought me back to entering the prison. And I remember that morning, so we were brought there, and Philip McKernan had brought us in, and we drove an hour and a half to get there. Um, and then we were told we couldn't bring our phones in. A couple of the guys went in with like smart watches. They had to take those off, no jewelry, all these sort of things were brought in, and we go to reception to check in. Reception sounds like it's a 5-star hotel. It's not. I hand over my passport, but the lady or the officer keeps the passport to make sure that it's me who leaves.
Mhm.
And so I can remember being quite anxious, not anxious. I was looking forward to it, but I think if you took my body temperature, it was slightly elevated. It was just like, do you know like when you're sitting in the dentist chair or something? And
Right.
right, and that, and then we walk in, and we meet all these inmates, prisoners. We've had this discussion already as to how we refer to people who are behind bars, so maybe we'll discuss that.
Mhm.
Uh, but it's such an emotional experience, and I really, I really want to talk a lot about the work Breakthrough do because I just feel it's absolutely incredible. But the reason I'm lingering on this point is because I think when we go in there, and you brought us in there, and you experience the emotion of connecting with these people, that's when it begins to mean something. So to somehow, I'd like to our listeners and watchers, see if we can relate, share some of that experience, although that's difficult because I think when you begin to understand what it feels like to be in there, shaking hands, having real conversations with with these people, then everything about the work you're doing, I think, means so much more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that point of when you're entering the facility and that like it's a little bit of it's a loss of control, right? You don't have
Mm,
your phone, you don't have your Apple Watch, you don't have your identification. You're
mm,
given this little plastic badge and that is who you are in the eyes of that correctional facility for those 4 hours that you're in
mm,
the facility is badge number 7 or whatever. And you walk through and you go in that big sally port, those automatic closing metal gates with the barbed wire all around the top and then kind of all around the sides. And um, it really kind of strips you down, right? To just like, I'm just Paul today. And like, I'm not exactly sure what to expect or what's going to happen. And that place is a really interesting place to start a conversation with someone because they have had the same experience to like an ultimate degree. They're wearing matching green clothes. Their inmate number 24756 or whatever. They're only called by their last name. Um, and even when they do count every day, they have to like call out their number. And so that's how they're known. Um, and it's this very dehumanizing place to kind of start. But then when you're put into conversation of we want you guys to find something in common with each other, or however, whatever the conversation topic is of that day, you're able to just connect as people. And I think that starting place is sometimes what is really powerful and reminds people that, like, we're all just humans out here doing the best that we can. And some of us grew up in different circumstances, had different thought processes about things, and made some pretty serious mistakes. And many of us have made very serious mistakes that we just haven't been caught for, right? So it's allows people to connect on that human to human level and start to break down some of the stigma that people with criminal histories experience. And we can just start to see them for that as people with this as part of their story, and start to define them more broadly as fathers and husbands and sons, and if you're in the women's facility, as moms and daughters and um, entrepreneurs, right? Like that really helps us connect and see people more broadly for who they are and not just this one defining experience of their life.
So certainly when you walk into that room, I mean, it's a very human experience. And prior to that, for me and for most of the population, we see criminals behind bars. We presume they deserve to be there.
Hmm.
We think of them as criminals. We
Hmm.
don't personalize them. We don't think of them as I'm nearly said what I'm thinking. We don't think of them as human beings.
Yeah.
The locked up behind bars. And you walk down that steps and you're given the sheet of paper, and I've described to people like speed dating because you have to walk up, and honestly, I'm standing there thinking, are these murderers? Are they rapists? What have they done? They're in a high security prison. Some of them are there for a very, very long time. I didn't enter into a conversation with any of them about what they'd done. Um, some of my colleagues did. I don't know if you're supposed to do that, but they did. Um, but at the end of the day, they're in there for very serious crimes, and you're going around and you're meeting them, and you're having these conversations. And the conversations may be lasting only 30 seconds or a minute or two. Um, but because you do this and you get through 20 people or whatever, it's they look like us, by the way.
Yeah.
They talk they talk like us. You know, it's like uh, now they're in green suits, which I said to a friend of mine recently. I said, just think of this. Let's say I don't lock you behind bars for 20 years, but you see what you're wearing now? Your favorite outfit looks great. You're going to wear that every day for the next 20 years. I said that alone. So that alone, by the way, is dehumanizing
Yeah.
that they're all dressed the same. Um, but it's that first, so that first experience where we interact with them, that's weird. But I suppose you begin to relax, you begin to engage them, and you become more comfortable as it goes on. And I'm going to say within a couple of minutes, I'm just walking to people, they're walking, and I'm just chatting to me. Like, guys, I mean, I see, I'm observing the language coming out of my mouth. I'm just chatting to them like they're ordinary human beings.
Hmm.
But that's the experience
Yeah,
because
absolutely. And
that's what they are.
yeah, and that's our mission at Breakthrough, is to provide opportunities for them to grow and change and be the best version of themselves, but also to help the community's perception of them change as well, right? And it goes from what we assume and what media and TV have told us about people who are incarcerated to, oh gosh, this is just a person. And like I don't have to define them by their biggest mistake
Mm.
anymore. Like I can learn about them as a whole. Um, and that's really important because we found very early on in our work as an organization that our participants can be so ready for life in the community after incarceration. They can be ready to have a career and to take care of their family and to live a legal lifestyle. But if the community is not willing to give them that opportunity to hire them in jobs, to provide them with housing, then we've really only solved half of the problem. So, not like breaking down the barriers, And it goes both ways, right? For folks who are incarcerated, they can start to build up in their minds that, like, the community is against them. And so when they get to interact with people in the community who want what's best for them and who believe in them and who believe in their transformation, that's equally transformative for them and their perception of people in the community. So it allows, just more opportunity for growth and connection and a safer society, um, which is really beautiful. And one of my favorite things about this work.
So I've no doubt some of the listeners are thinking, but these are bad people.
Mhm.
And since and people can do this, they can Google breakthrough, and they can Google Arkansas Valley Correctional Facility, and they can Google Stacey Putka, or go to YouTube, and they'll
Yeah.
see your wonderful TED talk. They'll see lots of stuff, but they'll see wonderful interviews with the prisoners,
Mhm.
and I recognized maybe 2 or 3 or 4 of those, prisoners, having met them there that day, and
Yeah.
some of them spoke about the fact, certainly, I recognized 2 or 3 of the people who were in there for murder. So, how do we if they had murdered a member of my family or something, would I be wrong to say they're bad people, they committed an awful crime, and they should be locked up?
I mean, it really depends on what the goal is. And I know I've had lots of family members who've been victims of really terrible crimes. And I know exactly what that feeling
Mm,
is. Not murder, but sexual crimes and violence. And is the goal punishment and retribution? And if so, then sure, like what you just said lands correctly.
mm,
If that's our goal, then we can accomplish that through incarcerating someone and throwing away the key. However, I don't believe that retribution or punishment really helps the victim of a crime. If we take a step back and think about what real healing looks like, for me and the people that I love who've experienced being the victim of a crime, I want the person who hurt them to recognize that
mm,
and to take full accountability and to deeply feel and understand what they did to hurt someone else. I would much rather someone who hurt my loved one to understand what they did instead of blame that person. Oh, well, if they hadn't called the cops on me, I wouldn't be here. Because we know it's not about the fact that they called the cops, it's about that you hurt someone.
mm,
And so the thing that I really admire about the people that we serve and the people who choose to be in our program, because we're a voluntary program, anyone, they get to pick if they want to be in the program, um, is they take full accountability for the mistakes that they've made and they recognize how they have hurt people. And I've sat down and talked to so many of our participants where they've said, like, I really, really damaged this person, not just physically in that moment, but their levels of trust with people moving forward, the way that they're able to care for their family and their loved ones because of this trauma that I caused. And that to me is justice. I think that justice is a complicated term. And I have a social work and a psychology background. And if you talk to any social worker or psychologist, people are really uncomfortable holding two truths at the same time.
mm,
It's how our political environment has gotten so polarized. Because we don't like our human brains are designed to pick one side or another, not to hold two truths at once. And if we really want to lean in to justice and healing and safety, all of these things that we care about, it's to hold the two truths. Someone can make a really bad mistake that really hurts other people, and they can recognize that and heal from that and grow from that and never hurt someone else that same way again. But they can only get from here to here with some help and some belief.
Mm.
And that to me is like the ultimate thing that you can do for the victim of a crime. Because you're actually helping someone change and grow and do things differently. And you're ultimately protecting more people in the future as well.
Are there, in your experience, are there some people who are not suited to come in your program
Mm.
because they've committed a crime and they have no remorse for that? They have no desire to change. I mean, there has to be within the prison population people who are in that state of mind. And I can imagine why some of those people might want to get in your program, because I'm sure there's some brownie points for going through the breakthrough program for people. Do you have a filtering system that goes, this individual is either not right, or at this point in time in their own personal development, they're just not a fit for this because they're not genuinely in the place? Have you a filter system for that?
Yeah. So people have to be behaving safely within the facility to apply to be in the program. And each facility has different kind of requirements of what that means or what that looks like. If someone is still really caught up in like the life of being incarcerated, they're not behaving safely. Right. So we're getting people whose actions are, going behind this thought that they want to do things differently. Um the program itself also filters folks out. The first 8 weeks of the program are extremely emotionally intensive work where we're asking them to do exactly what we're just talking about. They're talking about self-confidence, self-restraint, um, self-reliance. Like to think about self-restraint deeply for an entire week is really challenging. It would be for anyone. And so the people who stick with that and do the work and show up for the class sessions and have done homework and journaling and small group conversations about this topic, they're doing it for the right reasons. It's definitely not like culturally in a prison setting. You saw when you came and volunteered with us that day, our participants hug each other
Mm.
and they cry and they're very vulnerable. And those things are not looked upon kindly within prisons. And so people are really taking a big risk by doing this work. And so if they take that risk and they show up and they do the work every week, I have to believe that their intentions are genuine.
A- Is it reasonable to expect that when they go back into the main prison system, they have to pull back on that vulnerability? It may not be a safe environment to operate the way they will within their group.
Yeah. And that is really where like this culture shifting inside the correctional facilities comes into play. So when people have gone through our program and they are brave enough to go back out and kind of evangelize and tell people like, you should do this. This is really interesting. It's really helped me. It starts to change that culture and make it more safe for people to do that in the general public, the general population. There's definitely places and like housing units that it's not safe to do that. And people generally try and tend to keep to themselves and then show up with that vulnerability. Um, you know, I think you can still be vulnerable with yourself, even if it's just in your own internal dialogue and like journaling or writing work. And so people, I think, continue to do that, but they just might not be as vocal about it if it's not safe for them to do that.
Over the decades, as someone who's had an obsession with personal development and inner exploration and meditation, all these things, I've sat in so many courses around the world and sat with so many groups of people where people have demonstrated enormous emotional maturity and vulnerability. And two things. I want to talk a little bit about the stand up to the line thing, but I'm going to go after that. We sat in our small groups, and
Mhm.
I was in a group, myself and Philip, and I think maybe about a dozen of the um, inmates or whatever I should call them, but just to distinct them. So that's we're sitting in a group, and there's one of them is a alumni or whatever you call them. So he's leading it like a counselor. He's wearing a white polo shirt. He's leading it like a counselor, and he's guiding us through this. And few things struck me sitting that. One is that the young man leading it is leading it with the level of competence and maturity that is as good as I have seen anywhere in 4 decades of being in multiple groups. So how he held that group, the questions he asked, the bravery, he's willing to push people to be vulnerable, but yet but that balance of understanding people. So I don't know who the young man was, but I was observing him and I thought, like, he is as good as anyone I've sat with leading this. And so he goes in the group and he asks all of these, some of them pretty tough looking men, except for myself and Phil, who are pretty tough looking men. And these guys are sharing with a degree of emotional maturity that almost has me in tears because it is stunning. But there's a guy sitting opposite me, and he's chewing something. He's just sitting there with a kind of a grimace on his face. He's chewing something. I mean, I wouldn't. He's a guy I wouldn't pick an argument with if that's kind of his appearance. I'm just trying to present something here. And if you think of the type of what someone looks in this situation, that's what he looks like. So he looks like a, and I'm thinking to myself, all these people are opening up, including me, and I'm thinking he's sitting there thinking this is a pile of shit, and that's his expression. This is a pile of shit, and I'm just sitting here because it gets me out and it gets me some good food. So I'm this is all my judgment going on, and he doesn't speak. He just sits and he chews. So as it gets to the end, our facilitator, again, I can't remember the guy, says to him, "Would you like to share something?" He pauses for a second and he opens up. I am just blown away. I'm just blown away by how this guy expresses himself as opposed to what he looks like. And this, um, and here's the thing, and I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but at the very end, we've done the whole thing. And the very end, I'm going to call him the counselor, the guy who's leading it, comes back to myself and Philip and asks as we anything to share finally as we close. And Philip shared something. And then I said two things. One is I said, I have three adult sons. And I said, guys, this morning coming in here, I can tell you, you're the last group of people I want to ever meet and influence my children. I'm just being honest with you. I said, I'm sitting here now thinking, I would love my sons to sit in this room and meet you guys. That was my honest. I said, because I just feel like I'm sitting in a circle with a group of beautiful human beings. I said that knowing I was speaking to criminals, murderers, but and so this is back to what you said earlier. In that things for me, and it was very emotional for me to say this, but it comes back to what you said. I knew that simultaneously both things were true. I knew if they were sitting there, one guy beside me had been in for 42 years. So if you're in there for 42 years, it's not because we're parking fine. So I that was my thought, was that I both of those were true. That they were there because of crimes they committed, and yet probably as a result of the work they've done with Breakthrough, the experience of sitting them was the experience of sitting in a group of beautiful human beings. And that was my experience. It almost sounds foolish to say it, but that was my honest experience sitting there.
I mean, it sounds like maybe your person was Ronnie. If that, I don't know if that rings a bell, but the folks who graduate from the program,
That sounds
the
familiar.
the way that they guide people through is really beautiful and really
It
powerful.
it
Yeah.
rings.
And so I'm so glad that you got to have that experience. And you're not alone in wanting your kids to meet and interact with the people in our program. We have one volunteer um, who has volunteered for several years, and he brought his 2 college-age daughters in and, like, literally brought them in, and they got to meet all the people that he'd been volunteering with for years. And to this day, that act stands out to our participants of like, wow, he trusted us with his daughters,
Yeah.
right? Like that's a big deal. And so the fact that you said that to them in the small group, that's going to stay with them. And that's going to remind them like, I am a positive influence. I am a person who can give something to other people, right? And when they've been told by a system and when they've done actions in the past or they've taken from other people to start to see themselves as a giver in the community, it's going to change how they choose to show up every single day. And that is a big deal. I can't think of a bigger deal.
Yeah, and it surprised me a little bit because, going in there initially, I kind of felt to myself, should I be here? Like, are we just, I'm gonna say like visiting a circus or something. Do you know what I mean? Are we just
Yeah.
going in to view this oddity of these
Hmm.
incarcerated people?
Hmm.
And are we somehow demeaning them and insulting them by being there? And then that was my feeling. And then in that kind of intimate conversation with them, you realize how much it means for them to be there. And one guy said, he said, "Well, we now have something else to talk about. We've some experience to relate to differently." But I think, in case people think I'm going, I'm going mad, about having the experience, I want to talk about the step up to the line, and I don't know if you can talk us through a little bit of that because I want to get people to again. Gosh, I mean, I sound like this, emotional mess, but uh, people that know me go, "No, Paul, you never get a tear from that man's eye." That's the way I'm a human being. But I'm standing in that line and, you broke me, Stacey. You have genuinely, I'm standing in front of a line. I can remember the name of the gentleman I was standing in front of. I won't say his name, but I can remember him. He'd been in for 44 years. Maybe you know who I'm referring to. Small, I'd say he was Mexican or something. Small gentleman. Um, just the eye contact, looking in his eyes. For me, it was that experience was heartbreaking, almost, because you just feel so much. Is there a way we can talk through that a little bit that someone
Yeah.
listening to this could get a sense of what it is? Because I'm hoping as if we can talk to some of the questions that people might pause for a moment and actually go, how would I answer that question? How's somebody who's standing there in the green suit answering that question?
Yeah, absolutely. So the activity is it's in a nutshell, it's a way of being able to share a lot of your life experience, every single person in the room to share their life experience without talking. So there's 2 parallel lines across the gym floor. We just put them down with painter's tape, and all of our volunteers stand on one side of the line with their toes on the line facing the incarcerated folks. The incarcerated folks stand on the other line with their toes on the line facing the volunteers. It's a great way to make eye contact, um, and really, like, be present with someone as they share their story. So when your toes are on the line, you're saying that the statement I usually kinda stand in the middle and read the statements. You're saying that that statement is true for you. So I always start with an easy one, like, "I like music." Most people like music. Everyone is on the line when I say that prompt. There's no talking, and we proceed for about 40 minutes to go through maybe 60 different prompts. And people are stepping forward and back. So if they've experienced the prompt or that's true in their story, they're on the line. If it's not true for them, they step off the line. And you can look around and we ask the question, my parents paid for me to attend private school or college. And you can see pretty quickly that most of the volunteers are on the line and most of the incarcerated folks are not. And not recently, but I became a parent about 2.5 years ago. I have a
Congratulations.
2-year-old little girl. Thank you. Um, and when I used to do the activity, I would get emotional about like the upbringing stuff because I was thinking about my own experience as a child and my own father and my own mother and everything that they did to support me. And now as a parent, I read the prompts about childhood, thinking about what I'm able to do for my own daughter and what it would feel like as a parent to not be able to do those things. And I imagine that that's a similar experience for our incarcerated folks and our volunteers is they're thinking, yeah, every night my parents tucked me in and told me I was loved. And now every night I'm able to tuck my kids and tell them that they're loved. And that's usually what a volunteer is thinking. And for many of our incarcerated folks, their parents were not there to tell them that they were loved every night and to tuck them into bed. And now they're incarcerated and they can't tuck their children in every night and tell them that they are loved. So we begin to see this like multi-generational story unfold as well. And the activity at its core really shows us how we're different. So a couple other prompts. I grew up with more than 50 books in my house. We usually have most of the volunteers on the line, not a lot of the participants. Violence took place in my home. We have people from both sides of the line. I've experienced depression. We have people on both sides of the line. I've seriously considered suicide. Both volunteers and participants are on the line. So you start to realize, oh gosh, as a group, we have a lot more experiences in common than we do different. And had I had some of the experiences that I'm seeing the incarcerated folks have, I heard gunshots in my neighborhood. I thought I would not survive to the age of 21. You start to think maybe I would have done things differently if I had had those same experiences because we're not so different after all. And that all happens without talking, which is pretty powerful and starts to really shift how you think about and see people. So by the time we end up in the small groups where our peer facilitators, those are graduates from the program who are leading the conversation, and you're able to have a conversation, you've already broken down like, oh, we're not so different. And you're able to connect with people in the way that you were talking about where you want your sons to meet them because they have achieved such amazing emotional intelligence.
You
So
said
it's
it
a
was
very cool activity.
it's very powerful. You said it was 40 minutes. I'm a bit shocked by that, although I took part in it. I might have guessed 15, 20 minutes because you're so immersed in it. And as the questions go on, you're just standing there watching to see what the questions are. There's no talking, but there's a strong urge, I presume everyone feels it, to communicate because the sense of empathy with the person standing in front of you. And so you can reach and you can hold hands. So I'm
Mhm.
reaching across this 2 feet and I'm holding the hands of this man who's been in prison for 44 years. And he's nodding at me and I'm nodding at him. And it's just, it's an incredibly moving experience. And I think so of the volunteers that went, there was 12 of us from Ireland and there was maybe a similar group from Denver, but they're all from entrepreneurs organizations. So they're all founders, business owners. They own businesses of a certain scale, or you don't get into EO. So you've got this line of relatively successful people standing in a line and standing in front of a line of all these people who are incarcerated. And so you've privilege on one side, a lot of privilege, above average privilege, and the other side you have people who are, who've their freedom taken away. And the thing about us entrepreneurs is we're go-getters, and most of us probably can tell you how the struggles we overcame, how we did what we did to have what we have and do. So that's our story. We're self-made. And then you stand there and you realize No, that's not, if that's a story I'm telling myself, that's just not true, because you go, yeah, but my experience was standing in front of a man in prison for 44 years. It was as I witnessed how he had grown up compared to me, I'm going, I mean, and I'm not just saying this, I mean, I feel this. I feel that if I had grown up in his home, wherever it was in the Bronx or whatever he grew, if I grew up in his home and he had grown up in my home, I would be standing there in a green suit and he would be the entrepreneur, because there's just no way, there's just no way I could have gone through what he had gone through. And I'm not saying people don't come out of that. Of course they do, but the odds, like the odds of me ending up behind bars if I'd lived his life, and
Yeah.
the odds of him ending up with a successful life and family if he'd lived my life, are completely different. And the sense I had is that I was I was lucky. I was very, very lucky. I grew up, I had parents who loved me, who could afford to. I never worried about food or clothing or a roof over my head. I was educated. If I messed up, and of course I did, I had people who sat me down and explained right from wrong, and I grew up with proper morals and never witnessed violence. And then you see someone grew up with the complete opposite, and that's leveling. If it's the biggest thing I will take away, I now see the life I live as two things: an incredible privilege and an enormous stroke of luck. Um, and I then look at these people who are, as we're having this conversation, are still behind bars and going, they just were, in most cases, incredibly unlucky to be born where they were born.
And this is another example of like both things can be true because we have one graduate who comes to mind specifically who grew up with a life similar to yours and still made really bad choices
Mhm.
and still ended up incarcerated. And he's the first to tell you, like, when I do the step to the line activity, I don't have any of the same childhood experiences in common. And I still made really bad decisions. And here's how I ended up doing. And we have, volunteers who come in who had all of the bad things happen as children who didn't end up incarcerated. And so it's like both of those things are true, right? Like we can understand and empathize with if I had seen and experienced the same things as that person, it's not that far off that I would be in the exact same position. And they still made choices
Mhm.
that ended them up in this position. And now they have to choose how to make different choices, right? So like both things can be true.
Yeah, they still made choices, and I was pondering about this, and I have to be careful in case my sons listen to this. But one of my sons, um, when he was a young man, a young boy, sorry, he had a ferocious temper. I mean, a ferocious temper. He would be in school, he would turn tables over. That sort of a ferocious temper, and so much so as he got older, myself and my wife had this terrible fear that he would be in a bar some night and knife somebody. Genuinely, we were going like, with that level of temper, he would just flip, and he as he was growing, he was turning into. I'm not a big man, but he was turning into a big, imposing physical individual. I'm thinking he'll be in a bar some night, some guy will cross him, and he will just hit him, and he'll kill. Genuinely, this was a fear. He had a father who, had been meditating every day since he was 70 years of age. So and being obsessed with personal development. So what met that anger was me taking him to his bedroom and sitting down and explain to him how we can create calm, where calm is, where we can find it, and giving him practices, and he would buckle against them, and I would remain perfectly calm, and I would bring him back and bring him back, and I would teach him. And then I would teach him how we control our own emotions. It doesn't matter who said what. That's there. You're here. You decide. And by the way, this didn't happen. At times, I would sit in his room with him for hours, and we'd over and over and over and over again. Now you have this man who's 28 years of age. I say he's a big guy. Loves his Muay Thai kickboxing. So you probably don't want to cross him, but he's a gentle giant. I mean, he would, since he wouldn't get him to raise his hand to someone, let alone raise his voice to somebody unless he was severely threatened. But he is not the guy. I've heard of him being situations where people, say something and he just walks away, wears something. I thought of that, and then I thought, but what if he had a father who was a drug addict, a whatever, or just a father who had grown up and was a very violent individual? Then he would have almost inevitably ended up somewhere different,
Yeah.
and that's luck.
Yep.
That is just luck.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's luck. And he's so lucky to have had you. And you had to work really hard to do that, right? To sit and have those conversations with him. I know, I'm trying to get through the toddler tantrums and validate, yeah, I get this feels super frustrating. And what are we going to do with that frustration instead of screaming? Like,
Yeah.
screaming isn't going to help this at all. How can we get you to a place where you feel less frustrated, while acknowledging that that's a perfectly valid emotion, right? And that's a tough thing. I think that a lot of this goes back to the parenting, and back to the skills that parents have as they're being faced with this daunting task of raising a child. And you have to be pretty well equipped to be able to do that.
But also, I mean, if I take some credit for that, you also have to go, but that's because how I was raised. And had I been raised differently,
Mhm.
I wouldn't have those skills. Can I ask you, why? Because this is the Inner Entrepreneur podcast, and I know part of what part of what their it's a 32-week program they go under. Part of that is teaching them some entrepreneurial skills, and I've heard
Mhm.
about the entrepreneurial mindset. So, what do you see as the entrepreneurial mindset, and why is that so important to them?
Yeah. So, just tactically speaking, the last 16 weeks of the program are like an entrepreneurship 101 course. It's Colorado State University is a local university, the one that I graduated from. And one of their professors did their sabbatical project with us, and she just rewrote her entrepreneurship 101 curriculum to be in this in-prison environment. And the same way all business students take entrepreneurship 101, we don't expect that all of our participants are going to start businesses. The entrepreneurs who are listening to this podcast know that the entrepreneurial life and making a living based on what you're able to generate in business is really challenging. And it's not for everyone. But all entrepreneurs have tremendous grit. They're faced with an obstacle and they keep coming back for more. They're faced with obstacles again and again, day after day, and they don't give up. They just keep trying and thinking about it a different way. And they don't let that obstacle get them down or define them or define their situation. And so that grit is essential for anyone's, I think, in life. Like, I think the entrepreneurial mindset is really beneficial for all humans. But for people in our program who are going through incarceration and are going through the reentry journey of coming back into our communities, they are faced with at least 3 obstacles every single day. And so they have to have the inner confidence and skills to say, I'm not defined by this obstacle. I can overcome this obstacle. This is just a thing that I'm experiencing right now. And how else can I think about it? How can I reach out to my networks? How can I problem solve it? How can I manage my own emotions in this moment? Because no entrepreneur ever closed a deal by getting frustrated and blowing up, right? You have to have really good emotional management. And so that skill is really helpful to people as they're going through the reentry journey. I think it also is key in how you view yourself. When you view yourself as an entrepreneur, you're viewing yourself as the change maker in your own life, right? Like, I can create my own opportunity. I can create opportunities for other people. It's funny, when I first started this work, I was teaching the curriculum. I wasn't the executive director like I am now. And we were starting the organization with a small group of co-founders, and they were doing a lot of the legal work and that kind of stuff. And I said to the participants, like, I'm not an entrepreneur, but I can help you, think like one. And as we've built this organization over the past 8 years, it took me a while. But one of our co-founders said to me maybe 2 years ago now, like, you're a co-founder, right? Like, you really started this thing, actually. And I was like, no, I didn't. You guys like filed the articles of incorporation and stuff. And he was like, sure, we filed the articles of incorporation, but like, you built the curriculum, you built the program, you built the organization and and everything that has come from that. And so now, like, that has been transformative in my life, to see myself as an entrepreneur and see, like, I can, we have a team of 8 people. And I do all the fundraising, and they have jobs, and they have health insurance, and they support their families because of the work that I do.
Yeah.
And that shift for me has been transformational. So I can't imagine for our participants just to think of themselves as like, if I started a food truck, it's not just a food truck. The people who work for me and could support their families are doing that because of what I did. And it shifts how you see yourself as a community member and how you see yourself as a leader. And when we think about ourselves differently, we act differently. And so I think that the entrepreneurial mindset is a really beautiful, really empowering tool and a way to see yourself as the author of your own story.
Yeah, I think we very much need to widen our view of what an entrepreneur is, because I view an entrepreneur, I view a mother at home as an entrepreneur. If you're a creator, you're an entrepreneur. If you're
Mhm.
having an idea and you're creating something, so I would very much define you as an entrepreneur, but I would define you as an entrepreneur that has had enormous impact. I've been in business for 40 years. I don't believe I've had 10% of the impact on lives you've had, because I've witnessed that impact is absolutely incredible. And in one of the YouTube videos, and I would encourage people to look them up, one of the young guys said that he was definitely going to be in prison for the next 15 or 16 years before he would get parole. But doing the breakthrough, those experiences let him had it. That was like getting out once a week, just doing that. Um,
Yeah.
we've had a lovely conversation, and I'm conscious of your time. But before, just so people don't think this is all just nice talk, can we get into some of the then I will let you go. Can we get into some of the statistics, because the statistics of um how often people reoffend, how they fail when they go back into society, and how that shifts when people go through breakthrough. Can you talk through people that? Because I'd really like people to understand that this is real stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the cost behind this is important as well. So I'll share a couple of those numbers too. In Colorado, on average, it costs $74,000 per year to incarcerate someone for 1 year. The average sentence length of our participants is 12 years.
Okay,
So
so
that's a lot
that's almost $1 million.
just for one person to
Yeah.
incarcerate them. There's 18,000 people in prison in the state of Colorado.
Wow.
On average, in the years prior to 2020, the recidivism rate was around 45%. So about 1 out of every 2 people who got out of prison were returning to prison within 3 years. The recidivism rate that they're publishing now is 32%. That's from the year 2020, when we were trying to put people in group living environments. So I'll be interested to see how it changes over time. But usually when people return to incarceration, they go back, they go back for a longer period of time than the time that they were initially in. So it's costing even more money for taxpayers and our state budget. Some of the facilities we work in, they cost $110,000 to incarcerate people. So we kind of choose the facilities that are more expensive to work with folks, so we can move the needle on that front as well. For people who graduate from breakthroughs programs, and participate in our services post-release, because we talked a lot about the in-prison piece
Mm.
today, but we do a lot of work post-release as well, because our participants told us that they really needed that support when they came home. So when people get out and engage in our post-release services, their recidivism rate is less than 5%.
I mean, that's an incredible difference.
And 83% of the people who get out of prison, who've graduated from our program, contact us post-release, which for anyone who does work from the inside out, it's very rare that people engage in services post-release. So that 83% number is something that we're really proud of. So that means 83% of our participants who've gotten out are the ones that we're tracking that less than 5% recidivism metric for.
Mm. And they're people looking for support after they leave.
Yeah.
So someone has spent 20 years in a state correctional facility. What happens to them without your intervention? What happens to them on the day they're released? Well, firstly, in those 20 years, they don't get any support. It's punishment. They're not really getting anything to prepare them for life on the outside. So they're completely unprepared. They've been locked in a box for 20 years. The world has changed radically. What at this point in time state support do they get when they walk out the door?
In terms of state support, they get transportation to wherever they're going, and they get $100
That's it.
sometimes.
And
And
then
they
now you're on
and
your
then
own. Go for
and
it.
then they have legal supervision. So they have requirements, like I have to get a job within X amount of time. I have to have a housing within X amount of time.
Yeah.
I have to go take a drug test once a week or however many times during work hours, but I have to keep the job and keep the paycheck. So they have requirements and supervision provided by the state. But in terms of resources, they get transport and $100. Um, It really depends on someone's individual life circumstances. So, um, one of our graduates, like his wife came and picked him up, and they returned back to their home, and she had kept all of his clothes, and they bought him a computer and a phone. And so, like, in terms of that, those like logistical pieces, people can be pretty well set up if their families have the financial means to do that. Um, some people get sent on a bus and get off and have to figure it out,
Mm.
and they don't have anyone there to help them. So our services are designed to help people when they have fewer resources. We have a reentry pack that we give people when they come home that has a Chromebook, a cell phone, uh, a Visa gift card, hygiene supplies, like very basic things so that they can start looking for a job, so they can start looking for housing. And then our reentry specialist really engages on that search on both fronts with them. But even for people who have those like resources, like a phone and a Chromebook and money, they don't have other people who understand their experience. Because as much as your wife loves you, as much as your kids love you, they weren't there when you were incarcerated. And as you know, I wasn't either. I saw them, I visit them when I go in for events and for class sessions. But our reentry specialists are all people with lived experience. So if someone gets so frustrated because they're required to take a UA, but they're also required to be at work, they can call our reentry specialist and say, man, I'm feeling super frustrated and really stuck right now, and I don't know what to do to meet both of these competing requirements. Can you just help me talk through the situation? And everyone needs that. So there's kind of a twofold approach, like a very tactical, what do you need to be successful? And then a more emotional, social support with our reentry specialists.
Well, look, it's as I said at the beginning of this conversation, that day is one I will never forget. It's I just think of it often because our lives are, for many of us, our lives are so privileged. The simple things we just don't appreciate. And when you have the understanding, or the understanding I came away was, do you know what? I was born lucky. And if I hadn't been born lucky, well, then maybe he'd be visiting me inside. So it was, if this conversation has achieved anything, I would hope it would encourage people just to think a little longer, and sit with this idea that people can have committed crimes, but as a society, surely we want to support them. And so you're doing phenomenal work, Stacey, and I want to thank you for the work you're doing, and thank you for coming on the podcast. Where can people find out about you, find out more about this, and maybe support you, or maybe even visit the facility and join one of your programs if that's something they'd like to do?
Yeah. Our website is breakthrough.org. It's kind of our call to action, time to break through, and all words. If people go to our website, they can see the YouTube videos that you talked about on the resources tab. There's case studies about program graduates on there as well. There is, of course, our donate button. We are a nonprofit organization that has to raise the money to be able to do this work. The more money we raise, the more people we serve, the more lives we change. And every dollar really helps with that. So people can donate, and then there's a volunteer tab as well, and people can sign up to volunteer. We also need folks who want to employ people, folks who want to provide housing, and any other resources. So if anyone has any ideas, you're welcome to contact us through the website. And thank you for this opportunity and being able to hopefully shift some mindsets and some perceptions and spread the word about what we do, because this really is a two-pronged approach. We have to be able to work with the people that we serve and change the community's perception of those people. And this is a tremendous platform to do that. So I'm really grateful for the
Well, I
opportunity.
can certainly confirm that the 12 men I left with that day, their perceptions were shifted. Yeah, we did a debrief the following evening in Boulder, somewhere in Colorado, and
Mhm.
powerful impact, powerful impact. So I'm delighted you were able to come and chat to me. And yeah, if we've done nothing other than maybe shifted people's perceptions or given them a moment to pause and just think about it, that'll be work well done. Stacey, you're doing enormous work. It was a privilege to attend the breakthrough event in Colorado. Privilege to meet you, and the absolute best of work. Luck with your work in the future. It's a tremendous service to not only the people in prison, but to the rest of it. It's a tremendous service. So, Stacey Putka, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.